Hello again, witchy people. This is a VR to... I actually saw Drew's VR, She Who Walks Between the Worlds, her VR to Annie, MIRTHandReverence, and then I watched Annie's video, and so I'm doing a VR through Drew to Annie. So it's a VR to Annie at MIRTHandReverence, and she was asked about shifts and changes in her perspective within her path. You know, what, not necessarily what's made those changes, but what those changes, what those shift in perspectives were. Now I can tell you what shifts in perspectives I have had without telling you why, but I am going to tell you why. Now I have tried to record this and I wasn't even halfway through and the video was nearly 40 minutes long. So I'm going to cut that down somewhat. Now, I will link both Drew and Annie's videos below. And suggest you go and have a watch of those, because these people actually make a lot more sense than I do. And I think, okay, part of the reason they make more sense is because they have had specific shifts in their perspective within their path. What makes this more difficult for me is I have always been a hedge witch. I didn't necessarily use that label, but I've never changed my perspective. And this goes back to when I was very little. My grandfather used to call me an old soul. He said, you're old before your time. And he used to call me knowing, and it's very when I look at other people and their childhood experiences, yes, I do remember getting like excited at Christmas and Halloween and things like that, but I never really felt like a child. I always felt like I'd done this before, or I'd seen it all before, or I'd felt it all before. So in that way my perspective has now my path has changed a lot and that's shifted, but my perspective on it hasn't changed that much. And trying to separate those two is quite difficult. So, and I think it's not age, I think, that causes this shift in perspective, and sometimes you'll change in path. It's experience, and my experiences just happen to have coincided with my age. I am not a experienced person. I'm not well travelled. I've done some interesting things in my life, but I'm not well travelled. I haven't been abroad very much. I've been to France a few times. I have travelled quite extensively in my own country to a certain degree, but physically I have not travelled the world and met lots of interesting people. I have met lots of interesting people online, and I think that's the main change in perspective, was getting online. And that did change my whole perspective on my path. Now, I have known people from many different walks of life. I've known druids and voodoo practitioners, a voodoo priestess, not priestesses, just one. You know, all sorts of different paths within what you might consider. You know, I've known a couple of Norse practitioners, but I'd never met, as far as I knew, another hedge witch. And this was kind of before I put that label on myself. Certainly getting online and going into those first forays into chat rooms and finding the pagan community online, that changed my perception completely. It changed my perspective, my perception, And for a while, the way I dealt with people. Now, my mum became a born-again Christian. So after raising me in this very witchy, pagan way, she left that all behind. And I felt almost like I'd lost something in my 20s. And then I met this amazing man after being married and divorced and having children, being married and having another child and getting divorced. I met another man and we went on our first date. He asked me to marry him that night. I asked him to ask me. I told him to ask me again when you're sober, if you remember, in the morning. And he did. And less than 2 weeks later I was pregnant, and 5 months later we were married. Quick rundown. But this amazing man, who I'm still married to now, changed my whole perspective, because he allowed me to be totally me. He accepted me, and still does, for exactly who I am. He used to call me his kooky wife, because I'm totally and utterly kooky. He let me be me, and that causes a huge change in perspective, because you're thinking, I don't have to hide anything. Not that I ever really truly hid anything, I just didn't bother opening up about it. But now I could tell him why I smudged a house, or put crystals on a windowsill, or, you know, said certain things to my children and whispered into my children's ears when they were first born, or when I first became their mother, because I took on his daughter. She was about 2.5, nearly 3, and I took on his daughter as my own, and even whispered in her ear. And it's certain thing, and this was all stuff that my grandfather used to do for me. And there is the whispered secrets. It's like when you first get a pet, especially a cat. And I don't even know where this comes from. You have their name, you have their pet name, and then you have their secret name, which you whisper when they're born, or when you receive them, when you take in the pet into your own home. And you do the same with children. They have a secret name. Anyway, I'm digressing again, and this is why the last video got so long. So that was my main shift, and then another huge shift came, and I think it did for a lot of people, when we managed to get online, when computers became quite normal in households. Now for me that was the late 90s, early 2000s, I do believe. And I found online groups and chat rooms, mostly with pagans, other pagans, and after having this really lovely, I can be myself and it's all okay, I went kind of back in the broom closet for a while, because back then, it may be just the people that I knew, unfortunately, but there are a lot of, I think there was a very much a resurgence of Wicca throughout the 90s and 2000s. And it made people very staunch Wiccans, and if you weren't a Wiccan, you were wrong. That was kind of what I got told. And I had to stop really being myself online and learn an awful lot that didn't necessarily gel with me completely. So I mean, like I've said before, my way of doing things is if I pick up a crystal, for instance, or a stone or whatever, and it has a certain energy with me, and that energy, say to me, even though it may be used for, say, healing, and the energy I get for it is solving a conflict or anything else, I'll use the stone for how it feels to me, not what I'm told it should be. So I had to learn a lot of these sort of like Wiccan principles, accepted Wiccan principles, and that changed the way I appeared online necessarily, but it also changed my perspective in that for all these different people I knew all the shamans and the druids and the voodoo practitioners, I just thought witches were witches, to be honest. How naive is that? I'm in my 30s, 20s, coming on to my 30s, and I just thought witches were witches. So understanding that there was this whole segregated group, witches were segregating themselves and pushing people away if they weren't fitting into this mould, which was a shame. Like I said, it may have just been the people that I had come across, and it's not, as far as I can tell, it's not really like that now. The few Wiccans that I do know tend to be very, very open and accepting of not just other witches and other paths, but other religions and faiths, same as most people. I think we are, in general, to a degree, more open and accepting of other people, races, religions, sexuality. I think we are more accepting. I hope. Then my son says I'm speaking from a place of privilege, so I don't know. Oh. Anyway, so yeah, that changed quite a lot, and it wasn't until I think a few years later I went right back into the broom closet and didn't really share. Now, throughout my life, when things have happened, obviously when I've had children, when I've got married, my perspective has changed because my responsibilities have changed. My life has changed, and that has changed the way I've done things and how I've reacted to the world and how I expect them to react to me. But my perspective kind of has stayed the same. It hasn't really changed to the point where I do things differently, but that did make me do things differently. Sort of being online and not being accepted, I found very difficult. And then I kind of had a revelation, if you like, of what my grandfather taught me. This was in my mid-30s, and it was very much a remembrance of sitting near a rabbit hole. This is a quick story, I'll try to keep it quick. We were sat near a rabbit hole, and my grandfather told me, I was about 4 or 5, and he said, if you just sit here and you send this energy out to the rabbit in the hole, and just let him know that you've got good vibes here and good energy, and will him to come out, he'll come out. And lo and behold, the rabbit did. Whether my grandfather had been feeding this rabbit and getting to know this rabbit beforehand, I don't know, but to me it was magical. It was amazing that just by willing it and wishing it and sending out that energy, I had made this rabbit come out of its hole and not be afraid of me. Just look up, and it came up towards me a bit, and my granddad was like, don't move, don't move. And it came up and it sniffed, and then it trotted back in again, hopped back in again. And it made me remember that my grandfather always said to me, all you need is this and this. You need your mind, your imagination and your heart, and you can do anything. And it was remembering that. Now, as I said, I don't think that shifts, for most people, these shifts in perception come with age necessarily. They come with experience, and you don't need age to have experience. I am not a very well-travelled person. My daughter is much more, she's half my age, and she's much more well-travelled than I. She's been to many different countries, and she's experienced a lot in life, and I haven't. I had children very young. I was married very young, and I think I dedicated my life really to bringing up my children. Of course, now they've, for the most part, left home, your perception kind of changes again. And realising that you can do for you, rather than having that huge responsibility of another life or other lives. And I think it's Patricia, Beanbag Hagwag, who said, now you're in your 50s, you can just turn around and say it to people, and life in general, you can just say stuff it. I'm going to use stuff as the word. You know, you're doing okay. And I think my biggest shift in perception came from, if someone doesn't want to accept me for me, then I'm not losing out, because I am avoiding a person who isn't very tolerant, but they're losing out because they don't get to know me. And that's the main thing. I think I don't need tools, I don't need things to help me with my path. I just need my imagination and my heart and the will to do so. And if other people don't get that, then I don't, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if people don't get the way I do things. It doesn't matter if they disagree with me, because what I do is right for this witch. This witch is doing the right thing for her. And like I said, I'm not saying that comes with age, I'm saying it comes with experience. And experience doesn't necessarily mean age. It just does for me. My age has definitely shifted my perspective. Being online shifted it, realising that I wasn't going to be accepted just because I was a witch by other witches. That changed my perspectives. But certainly sort of having children, finding someone who accepted me for who I am. And the other thing I think that changed my perspective quite a lot was when my mum did become a born-again Christian, especially when she was baptised. I kind of had this, because I've always been who I am, I had to then realise that people could change completely. Not change who they are basically, but change things like their religion and or their path in life, and they could still be the same person. It was really hard to get my head around at the time, and I felt lost for a little while, but I kind of get it now. I still find it hard that I haven't got my mum in my witchy life, but on the reverse side of that, she's very accepting of who I am. And she's got a friend who she said, a friend who I go to church with, her sister is a white witch, and I told her all about you. I said, my daughter's a white witch too. I didn't have the heart to say to her, Mum, I am just a witch. There's no white, black, grey or anything. I'm just a witch. But it was lovely that she's okay with it, and she doesn't care, as far as I can tell, if other people aren't okay with it, because it's got nothing to do with them. As long as she's okay with it, that's fine. But yes, I think what has changed my perspectives a lot is experience, and that for me has come with age. But how it's changed is, I think because I've become more, the internet opened up hugely the world for me, and I did become more worldly without having to physically travel. And that opened me up to a lot of different people, and a lot of different witches, and that kind of, it does change your perspective, because when the whole world suddenly becomes open to you, God, bear in mind, when I was a kid, you know, I had a reel-to-reel tape recorder. You know, we didn't have video games, didn't have mobile phones, didn't have CDs. You know, and you know, we used to have pound notes, not pound coins, and you know, you could get a whole bag of sweets for 2.5 pence, and we had half pences. We had half pennies back then as well. So for someone especially of my generation, perhaps, who has had this whole experience of the world opening up for them, it can be quite mind-blowing, and it does change your perspective a lot, because it opens up the whole world to you. Now, this has probably gone on again too long, and I may have to edit. But if you want to hear about what changes in perspective other people have had, I do suggest you watch Drew's and Annie's videos, which I will link below. And please do watch to the very end, because I've got to say this, Drew, you're amazing anyway, okay? We all know what I think of Drew. I think she's absolutely fantastic, and she's so honest. If you watch the very end of Annie's video, you'll see something that she does quite a lot at the end of her videos. She has the most amazing, genuine smile ever. So yeah, watch to the end of Annie's video too, because you'll love it. Her smile makes you feel like she wants to tell you everything and share everything, and she probably does. So yes, do watch. And like I said, theirs will make a lot more sense than mine, because I have had changes in perspectives, but they have been due to quite simple things, and it hasn't shifted my perception so much, in as much as recalling my childhood, for all the fact that my grandfather called me an old soul and I was never young, and I wasn't really. I always felt like I knew something else, or done something else, or been something else, I don't know. And I do have changes in perspectives on deity and such like, but it's not really, it's changes of thought, not really changes of perspective, and it's kind of hard to define one from the other. But if you watch Annie and Drew's videos, you'll kind of get a much better response. But I just found it interesting, and I thought about the things, not necessarily what perspectives I've had that have changed, but what has changed my perspectives, which is what I decided more to do. Thank you for watching, witchy people. I'll be back soon. Bye for now.